What's up, and welcome to a new episode of the Wilbur and Gold Show. I'm your host, Will Dalton, a.k.a. Wilbur and Gold, and I hope you're all doing all right. It is episode 9 of the Wilbur and Gold Show. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. It's a very Panthers / Cam Newton heavy show. Quite a bit has happened on that front since I've last done an episode, and so I kind of wanted to cover some of that. Hope you're all doing okay with obviously we're in the middle of the coronavirus thing. We're in isolation, quarantined, or at least we're supposed to be, at least for the next month or so, until about April 30th, I believe. And man, this escalated quickly. I was supposed to be covering the ACC tournament for my former internship, the David Glenn Show, who covers the ACC. So obviously that was kind of the big event, and literally we weren't there for rounds 1 and 2, and actually kind of worked out for me because the tournament was in Greensboro, and I'm actually from High Point, which is right next door to Greensboro. It's essentially the same thing. And so I was really excited for it to be back because I actually grew up with the tournament in Greensboro as a kid, and so for it to be back for the first time in 5 years, and this being my first year as a media member covering it, I was really kind of pumped up for that. So we didn't go to round 1 or 2, and the first game of the next round we were covering was supposed to be Clemson, Florida State. Well, the night before was actually the night that Rudy Gobert had tested positive for this thing, and then just sent the whole NBA into a doozy and eventually suspended the season until further notice. And we're still on that further notice. People are speculating how we might potentially be able to get the season in as far as the NBA is concerned. But that was kind of the first domino to fall, and it was just one thing after the other. On the shuttle on the way over to the Greensboro Coliseum where the ACC tournament was being held, on Twitter you were seeing that the other Power 5 conferences had already canceled their tournament the day after the NBA had suspended their season. The SEC, the Pac-12, all the major conferences had already canceled. The ACC and the Big East and a few others, they were kind of the only other big ones lingering in the balance, so to speak. And literally, as we were being handed our credential at the Coliseum, it was announced ACC tournament is canceled. And then the commissioner, that's when he came out and did his little speech, I guess the tournament's canceled speech. You may or may not have seen that on TV. You might have saw me in the background somewhere. Doubt it. But so yeah, it was a weird experience for sure. And obviously it's just kind of unraveled to what it is now, which obviously all sports are on hold. All college sports were canceled, and luckily, as of this week, they voted to where spring athletes will get a year of eligibility back. Not the winter sports, at least not that we know of at this point, and probably won't be for the winter sports, but spring sports they voted, and so they're going to get a year of eligibility back. Baseball, women's soccer, things of that nature, if they want it. So that's kind of what's really gone on up until now. And then obviously the NFL free agency thing has been a godsend as far as whether you're a sports fan or a sports media member. That's what you do for a job. NFL free agency was just a godsend because, there's always going to be speculation of, when's certain things going to begin again. There's that to talk about and other hypotheticals and things like that. But NFL free agency was really the only thing in real time that we had to talk about that was actually going on. And so obviously A lot of moves were made. This is actually, it's a weird year because it's the first time in like 20 years that the supply and demand of quarterbacks in the NFL was just off. I mean, there was more quarterbacks, good quarterback, not just scrubs, good, solid quarterbacks out there than quarterback jobs to be had or teams that needed a quarterback. And so it was really kind of a weird year on that front, and that's actually a little bit of an element of what we're going to talk about in a minute as far as, I mean, what's the future of Cam Newton? I mean, Cam Newton and Jameis Winston are probably, I would assume, the top two names still out there. It's like, well, what's going to happen with them? And so we're going to get into that a little later, but I kind of want to start out with this, and that is, look, if you're a Panthers fan, which I am, and it just so happens that Cam Newton's my favorite football player, so I'll just be completely transparent about that. But here we go. If you're a Panthers fan, it's okay to be upset with how they handled Cam Newton and maybe just how they've unraveled this whole thing down in Charlotte. But you should not be surprised of what happened. Let me explain. Well, first, let's just take a look, shall we, at what the NFC South is, because the NFC South is getting loaded. Let's just take a look at the basics. Tom Brady signs with the Buccaneers, obviously. That was the big marquee signing of NFL free agency this year. And then they're obviously returning star receiver Mike Evans and also Chris Godwin, who's another good receiver, and others. The Falcons, not long after that, well, they signed Todd Gurley the day after he was released by the Rams. Well, was one of the better running backs in the league. He didn't have a good last year, but I like to think that he's going to be just fine on the Falcons. I think his relationship with the Rams was just bad, and I think that probably contributed to a bad season. But and some injuries, but I think he's going to be good for the Falcons. And then obviously they're returning Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. They lost Austin Hooper to the Browns, but they've got a lot of pieces coming back. The Saints re-signed Drew Brees to a 2-year deal. They bring back Alvin Kamara. They bring back Michael Thomas. They bring back Taysom Hill. I mean, they're going to be loaded. The NFC South is going to be loaded. And then there's the Panthers, which the Panthers have been essentially stripped down to the roots. Let's just take a look at look. The Panthers, they signed Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year deal. They have released Cam Newton. They've signed Robbie Anderson. That was the other day. He's a solid deep threat from the Jets. And most of the rest I've had to Google who they were because I didn't know who they were. David Tepper has officially put his fingerprints all over the football side of the Carolina Panthers, which he had not done up until this year. He had done plenty of things on the business side because obviously he's a businessman, a very successful one. I'm pretty sure he's the most wealthy owner in the NFL, one of. And so he's able to offer bigger paychecks than a lot of teams can offer, hence the big-ass contract that new head coach of the Panthers, Matt Rule, signed several months ago. You know, Tepper was just able to offer him more money than, let's say, the Giants, who had an interview supposedly coming up with Matt Rule not long after the one with the Panthers. But, you know, the paycheck that Matt Rule was offered was just too good to refuse. Sorry about that. And so let's just take a look at everything they've done, beginning with December 3rd when they fired head coach Ron Rivera with 4 games left in the regular season. They fired Ron Rivera, who's been the head coach of the Panthers for the last 11 years, I think it was. So a decade, essentially. Luke Kuechly retired after the season. Luke Kuechly, a big reason for the reason he retired was obviously because of his health. He's had, I think, 3 concussions, and he's such an explosive player, and he explained that he if he was going to keep playing, he couldn't play the way he plays and it be safe. Now, was there anything going on behind the scenes as far as not liking the Matt Rule hire or other things going on? We don't know, because Luke Kuechly, he's not the type of person that would put that dirty laundry out on the street. He's classier than that. But so they lost Luke Kuechly, the face of their defense for about the last decade. Greg Olsen, cut, tight end, that's been a core piece of the Panthers for the last handful of years. And that one was kind of ugly because supposedly, according to the Panthers, it was mutual. He's now with the Seahawks because they picked him up. The Panthers said that release was mutual, but Greg Olsen would come out and say he knew nothing of it. So that was a little ugly. A burned bridge, if you will. Trey Turner traded. Another good piece for the Panthers. James Bradbury, Mario Addison, Gerald McCoy. They all have left in free agency, and Panthers just let them walk out the door. And that's, McCoy didn't have a great year, but Bradbury and Addison, those are two of their better defensive players. And then obviously the big one is Cam Newton. March 17th, Cam given permission to seek a trade. At least that's how it was posted when the news was broke on the Panthers' Instagram page. Meanwhile, Cam Newton responds on that Instagram post, excuse me, and basically said, "Don't act like I asked for this. I didn't ask for this. You did this. Don't slur my words. Don't mix up what I didn't ask for this. You're doing this." Another instance of it being mutual. And according to a source close to Cam he found out the same way we all found out on that Instagram post and throughout social media. He was under the impression that he was going to be the guy once he was 100%. And then, of course, and he had to be, supposedly, according to that source, he had to be consoled when he found out, and he was completely blindsided. How much of that's accurate, I don't know. But, I could see that. Now, whether or not Cam was told something by the Panthers, or whether maybe Cam just had an assumption that he shouldn't have had, we don't know. But you got to admit it's a little fishy. And so, not only that, but 20 minutes later it was announced that they're preparing to sign the Panthers are preparing to sign Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year, $60 million deal. Not 20 minutes after they break the news that they've given Cam permission to seek a trade. In other words, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And then they've also signed Robbie Anderson from the Jets, good deep threat, and then others that I had to fucking Google because I didn't know who they were. So, yeah, the Panthers have, Tepper has really stripped this thing down to really just the nuts and the bolts and the foundation. Well, there is no foundation anymore, not even that. Even that's been ripped away. Obviously, you still got McCaffrey. He's entering the last year of his 5-year rookie deal. And if you know anything about running backs here lately, a.k.a. Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, others, they want to get paid. McCaffrey is going to want to get paid. I don't know if he would make as big of a deal about it as others, like Ezekiel Elliott, that has yet to be seen. If the Panthers traded him tomorrow to get pieces, it would not surprise me, which is really kind of the moral of this rant, which is what I started with. If you're a Panther fan, I get it if you're mad. I get it if you're mad about what David Tepper has done to this roster. I get it if you're mad about how they handled Cam Newton, basically hanging him out to dry, because I was mad about it as a fan and as somebody he's my favorite football player. I don't like how they handled Cam at all. I accept the fact that David Tepper has a different vision for the Panthers and than what they had, and he's stripping it down to the roots. That's fine. He wants a clean slate. I get it. But for somebody that's been the face of your franchise for almost a decade, he deserved better than potentially to get lied to and blindsided. We still don't know what was said between the Panthers camp and Cam's camp. But he deserved better than to find out that he was going to be given permission to seek a trade on social media, and then 20 minutes later to see his replacement, Teddy Bridgewater, was coming in on a 3-year deal. And then you knew nobody was going to trade for him because you know already that, well, we can just wait and have them release him and get him for a better deal than if we would have traded for him. So nobody was going to do that. Not to mention, the Panthers probably knew for months now that they were done with Cam. I mean, just listen to David Tepper in this. He's asked multiple times, what's the deal with Cam? I mean, I think this is back in February. What's the deal with Cam? What's the deal with Cam? He says this.
Said again and again and again about it's a question of how healthy his foot and otherwise, and that's still the number one overwhelming thing, to see how healthy he is and how we can figure out when he's healthy or not. And, everything comes from that.
Dave, have other teams reached out inquiring about his trade possibility, if he's available for trade? And if so, was that something that you'd be open for?
I could ask Nicole. She answers the phone in her house, but no, I haven't heard about that. So
Cam said he absolutely would be back this year at the Super Bowl.
did you talk to Nicole? I told you.
I'm just saying that Cam's saying he'll absolutely
She's
be back.
kind of short, so I can't know.
So if he says he's absolutely going to be back, and he was inspired by conversations with you and Rule, where do you stand? Will you think he'll be back?
Listen, I'm not a doctor. And I said it a million times. Is he healthy? And how does? I mean, he's not a doctor. So there's a lot of different things can happen. But first is he healthy? Tell me that, and then we can talk.
I mean, does that sound like somebody who's committed? I don't think so. To me, that was when I was like, okay, Cam. And some people would argue it was when Ron Rivera got fired and all this shit got started, the dominoes began to fall, that Cam should have been a little leery about his job security. But to me, when David Tepper said that, because if he really wanted to keep Cam, he would have had a little bit more concise answer than just, I don't know, he can talk when he's... Like, does that sound like somebody who really wants to keep him around? And then Matt Rule kind of added another twist to it not long after at the NFL Combine when he said this.
Oh yeah, I absolutely want Cam here. There's no doubt about that. I just again, I'm going to be very methodical about the way I do things. Right, it makes me kind of boring sometimes. I get it, but at the end of the day, it's all about what's next for us, and that's just we have to make sure we continue to get him healthy, and he's doing a great job of that. I want to make sure I say that he's going above and beyond in that regard. So when healthy, I think there's no doubt about who he is and what he can do. So we just have to get him there.
So then that made it sound like, okay, maybe that he wants Cam. So I could get maybe if Cam was receiving messages like that straight to his face, I could get why Cam would think they want him to be the guy. But again, even with those comments, the bigger overwhelming piece of evidence over here is Ron Rivera fired, Greg Olsen released, all these other players allowed to walk out the door in free agency, others traded. I mean, all these, Eric Reed, one of the better, didn't mention him, Eric Reed, one of the better defensive players this year, he's allowed to walk out the door. He's released. You shouldn't be surprised at what happened. You can be mad about how they handled Cam because I think they handled him bad because now, because of the market and because most quarterbacks and most teams who are looking for a quarterback, they already had one before Cam was released. So now Cam Newton is pretty much the odd man out. And so really, if the Panthers, I can understand being mad because for somebody who was the face of your franchise and loved that franchise as much as Cam did, loved the fans as much as Cam did, if you knew you were done, and there's a good chance the Panthers knew they were done, regardless of what Matt Rule said, he probably did want Cam to be there, but did he really? If you knew you were done, you can look out for your organization's best interest and still do everything you can to help Cam. I mean, Bruce Arians, Buccaneers just signed Tom Brady. Bruce Arians is still trying to help Jameis Winston get a job. He's called multiple teams for him and tried to sell them on Jameis Winston. Are the Panthers doing anything like that? Not that we've heard. And so I get being mad, but you shouldn't be surprised if you actually look at what was coming. All right, so let's move on to this. So now here's another question about the Panthers. I told you this was going to be a Panthers-heavy show, and, it's... So here we go. What exactly are the Panthers doing? They've released Cam Newton. They've made all these moves. They've stripped it all down to the nuts and bolts of Bank of America Stadium and Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, so what exactly are the Panthers doing? Because most of us thought, especially when you kind of, as we approached free agency and you weren't sure about what was going on with Cam, but if you considered the possibility that Cam was released or traded or whatever, not with the Panthers anymore, the bottom line, the real assumption was they might be tanking for Trevor Lawrence of Clemson, who's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft next year when he's finally eligible to be drafted. So then the Panthers released Cam, but then not more than 20 minutes later, they signed Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year, $60 million deal. So then most was like, okay, so they're not tanking for Trevor Lawrence, so what are they doing? Because it would appear with what the Panthers were doing, they were stripping it all down. They were positioning themselves to tank. Really the only piece left to go, because, Christian McCaffrey can't win games by himself. He tried his best this year, and we saw how that turned out. Nothing against him, but a running back cannot carry a shitty team. They just can't. Especially a team that doesn't have a defense. I think a running back could maybe carry a team if you had a good defense, but the Panthers don't have a good defense anymore, so that ain't happening. So Cam Newton was really the last piece to fall, and then it's like, okay, they're definitely tanking for Trevor Lawrence, but then they signed Teddy Bridgewater, so it almost appeared like, okay, well, it looked like they thought they might want to tank, but now it's like, but we're not sure we really want to go that route. So it's almost like, at least it would appear to most, once they signed Teddy Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson, a good deep threat from the Jets, it would appear now they're just going to be mediocre and win enough games to not be good, but also not be in the high draft pick conversation where they would need to be to get Trevor Lawrence. No, not so fast. I'll tell you exactly what the Panthers are doing. Even though they've signed now that they've signed Teddy Bridgewater, they've got Anderson, they've got McCaffrey back, all the other players that I had to Google. I'll tell you exactly what the Panthers are doing. They're tanking for Trevor Lawrence. And all you have to do is look at the Panthers' schedule this year. Because here's the thing about Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater is not going to be a game changer for the Panthers. He's a solid, good quarterback, and I love his story. I love the journey he's gone on since the time he got hurt with the Vikings when he looked like he could be a pretty good quarterback, and then he got hurt, obviously, and it was a devastating injury, but he came back and had a great year this year with the Saints, filling in and going 5-0 in Drew Brees' absence. But here's the problem with that. The Saints have a lot of fucking weapons. And the Saints are a night and day difference between what the Panthers have. Here's what the Saints were working with that Teddy Bridgewater was so conveniently dropped into. Alvin Kamara, one of the best backs in the league. Michael Thomas, the highest paid receiver in the league and one of the best receivers in the league. Taysom Hill, one of the better tight ends in the league, the Swiss Army knife dude who can play quarterback and just do it all in the NFL. And, I don't know, the 5th-ranked offensive line protecting Bridgewater in the NFL? Yeah, that's what he was working with. Panthers ain't got that. Their offensive line is trash, which is part of the reason why Cam Newton struggled so much, because he was running for his life half the time and not running in the good sense where he could actually do damage, because the Panthers didn't even want him to run anymore. They didn't have a good offensive line. I will say this. The Panthers will have a solid receiving core because I think DJ Moore is good. I think Curtis Samuel's, I think those guys are solid. I think Robbie Anderson's a good pickup. And then obviously McCaffrey, but the O-line's trash. The defense has a lot of work to do. And here's the compelling part of that. You might hear me saying, oh, well, these guys are solid, so how are they tanking? Well, I'll tell you how. Look at their schedule. Because just because you're solid, it doesn't mean you're going to win games. You don't have to get blown out every game to be tanking. Because you look at the Patriots, they're in a similar situation. Honestly, they lost Tom Brady. They're the three teams, in my opinion, that are going to be most in the running for Trevor Lawrence is going to be the Panthers, the Patriots, and the Jags, because all they've got is Gardner Minshew at this point. Patriots don't have anything. Hoyer's not the answer. Stidham's not the answer. Panthers, they're going to put up some points, I think, with McCaffrey and the solid receiving core that they have. And I think Teddy Bridgewater's going to be just fine. But that doesn't mean they're going to win a lot of games. They could have a lot of close losses, and that's what I expect them to have. Let's just take a look at their schedule. We'll take a look at the home games and then the away games for the Panthers in 2020. Home, Bears, loss. Lions, I think that's one of the ones they're going to win. Broncos, I think they could squeak that one out, maybe. Raiders, I think that's the third one that they could win. But Cardinals, that's a loss. Falcons at home, maybe the fourth game that I think they could squeak out. But I'm not convinced on that because I think the Falcons could be potentially really good. And then the Saints and the Bucs at home as the two losses. So that's the home games. And then on the away side of things, Vikings, loss. Packers, loss. Chiefs, loss. Chargers, loss. Redskins, I think Ron Rivera is going to be a good coach, and I think he's going to be out for blood when he plays the Panthers. And I think Haskins is going to develop. So we'll just say Redskins, very close, but that's a loss. Falcons, Bucs, Saints, all divisional games, losses. 3 straight losses right there. So honestly, there's only 3 games that I feel good about the Panthers winning. Lions, Broncos, and Raiders at home in Charlotte. Patriots are going to have a similar record. They're going to have a similar situation. They're going to lose a lot of close games. Jags as well. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of there's not going to be a lot of teams in the running for Trevor Lawrence because pretty much all the teams left, the handful of teams left that need a quarterback, they didn't take one in free agency. The whole reason they didn't take one in free agency is because they're getting ready to draft one, either Joe Burrow, Tua, Justin Herbert, Love. Like, they're going to draft one, and I don't think there's a lot of busts in that group. I really don't. Not this year. And then other teams that could potentially not, maybe be mediocre to not that great, they just got their quarterback last year, and they're still developing them, a.k.a. like Daniel Jones on the Giants. They don't need one right now. They're not going to need one next year. There's not going to be many teams that need that number 1 overall pick to get Trevor Lawrence. Like, need it. Like, we just tanked to get it. There's not going to be many teams like that, and I think it's going to be the Panthers, Patriots, and the Jags up front for that spot. So what are the Panthers doing? Now that they've stripped down the whole thing, they've gotten rid of Cam Newton, but then they bring in Teddy Bridgewater. They're tanking for Trevor Lawrence. And now let me finish up with this. I've been talking a lot about how the market for quarterbacks has been, the supply and demand has been off this year. There's been way too many solid, not scrubs. There's been way too many good quarterbacks than teams that need one. And that kind of leaves people like Cam Newton and Jameis Winston out to dry right now. There's a few teams possible they could go to, and we'll get to that in just a second. But for starters, let's just take a look at all the moves that were made. It's insane the amount of good quarterbacks that have moved and gone to a new team via trade or free agency or whatever. Tom Brady, the Bucs, obviously, is the big one. Phillip Rivers to the Colts. Teddy Bridgewater to the Panthers. Nick Foles to the Bears. Marcus Mariota to the Raiders. Case Keenum to the Browns. Kyle Allen to the Redskins. P.J. Walker of the XFL. He's gone to the Panthers as well. That was actually the first team. Fun little fact about the Panthers. They were the first team to take a player out of the XFL reboot of this year, PJ Walker, who is reuniting with his former coach at Temple, where he went to college, Matt Rule. Matt Rule was the coach at Temple when PJ Walker was there, so interesting dynamic to that. And then also Jordan Ta'amu went to the Chiefs. He was also out of the XFL. That's a lot of moves for quarterbacks, and most of those are really good quarterbacks too. So what does the market look like for Cam Newton and Jameis Winston? Because those are really kind of the two big names that people are speculating about right now. Obviously, you got people like Andy Dalton who could get traded, but I doubt it. I think he's going to stay put with the Bengals. I think they're going to draft Joe Burrow, and then I think Andy Dalton's going to spend the last year of his contract backing him up, maybe mentoring him. I don't know. He's not that good anyway. And then also Joe Flacco, but I mean, if there's not a market for Cam Newton or Jameis Winston, there sure as hell isn't a market for Joe Flacco. So I don't even know if he'll go anywhere this year. But, so what does it look like for Cam and Jameis? Well, we'll start with Cam Newton. You know, one of the more popular speculations was the Chargers. You know, there's some good perks to that. And in fact, you know, I could see scenarios for all the main destinations that have been thrown out there. First one here being the Chargers. You know, there's a new stadium, and the Chargers fan base, really, especially since they moved from San Diego to LA, it's really been lacking of energy. And so Cam Newton could come in with that new stadium that the Rams and the Chargers are going to be playing in, and he could really fill seats. Not to mention, he really looks good in powder blue. So fan base, new stadium. Tyrod Taylor's not the guy also. That's who they've got at quarterback now. He was backing up Phillip Rivers last year, and now since Rivers is to the Colts, he's kind of stepped up, and he's the main option right now. Chargers are a contender, I think, with Cam Newton as well in the AFC. They've got good offensive pieces. They've got good defensive pieces. You add Cam Newton, somebody who can run and be a dual threat, assuming they allow him to play that way, because that's when he's at his best, because that's what he does. I think they're a contender in the AFC with the Chiefs and the Bills and others. I really do. And not only do you get Cam Newton, you've still got a number 6 overall pick in this year's draft. You use that to get a weapon. I don't know what you would get. I haven't looked into specifically what the Chargers need, but honestly, I think the Chargers could be the most logical fit. And then you've got the Patriots. Bill Belichick. He's got a history of taking broken things, and right now Cam's broken. He feels he was blindsided by the Panthers. He feels like he's being blindsided. Well, not blindsided. He feels like he's being told to kick rocks essentially by most of the league because he hasn't been picked up yet, and he's been released from the Panthers for about a week now. Nobody traded for him either, by the way. And Bill Belichick has taken players that are in those type of situations and won with them. So to me, I think it would be an interesting idea of Belichick saying, all right, well, the whole league has told this guy he's not good enough anymore. Watch this. To me, that would be interesting to see, but I don't think the Patriots, I don't think it's going to happen because Bill Belichick likes a guy who's accurate, and accuracy has always been a little bit of an issue with Cam. And so for that reason, I don't see the Patriots as the destination, and I also don't see the Chargers as the destination. I think the most realistic destination that Cam Newton could have gone to as a starter would have been the Redskins, where his former coach, Ron Rivera, just became the new head coach. To me, that was the most realistic destination. Obviously, they got Dwayne Haskins. You would have brought in Cam Newton. They would have fought for the job, and that could have been very interesting to see. But here's my take on what's going to happen to Cam. For the first time in his career in the NFL, he's going to have to be a second-string quarterback, at least for a while, until he can prove that he's healthy, until he can prove that he's still got it, until he can prove that he can throw well enough. And, he's going to have to be a backup quarterback for the first time in his career in the NFL if he even gets picked up. To me, and the reason I can come up with that to me, what really did it was when the Redskins traded to me, what really told a lot was when the Redskins picked up Kyle Allen. The Panthers, he was the Panthers starter for most of this season, but he's typically the Panthers backup guy. He didn't do great. It was his first year as an actual starter in the NFL. It was his second year on the Panthers. So he was essentially a rookie. He essentially played his rookie season this year. And Ron Rivera seemed to like him. He defended him a lot to the media when they would ask, about his struggles. And he would just be like, he's young. He's essentially a rookie. Like, give him a break. To me, the fact that Ron Rivera, did... To me, the fact that Ron Rivera took Kyle Allen off the Panthers, brought him to the Redskins, and not Cam Newton, to me that told a story. Because it's like, the Panthers, who had just fired him with 4 games left in the season, he went and did some business with the Panthers, and instead of taking Cam Newton, he took Kyle Allen instead. To me, that is loud. And so, because of that, not just that, but to me, if Cam Newton was going to get picked up by somebody like the Chargers or the Patriots, he would have been picked up by now. Still nothing. And so I think Cam Newton will get picked up eventually. It might be close to the start of the season. It might be into the season before he gets picked up by somebody who thinks they might need him. But for the first time in his career, he's probably going to have to be a backup. And I don't know how that's going to sit with Cam. That is yet to be seen. But to me, the most likely destinations for Cam at this point to be a backup or to fight for a job, well, one of these I can say to fight for a job. The other would be for sure a backup, and then we just have to see what happens, would be the Titans and the Jags. Because the Titans, they just signed Ryan Tannehill to that big deal, obviously. So Cam wouldn't be coming in to fight for a job. He'd be coming in to be the backup. But when you think about the fact that the Titans had the 8th ranked offensive line, to me, when you consider the fact that the Titans had the 8th ranked offensive line in the NFL last season, in the regular season, and then you pair that with the running threat of Derrick Henry, and you pair that with the thought of, okay, that's going to lead to a lot of good play action runs by Cam Newton if he was in, that could potentially be interesting. So while I don't think Cam would be coming in to fight for a job right off the bat, at least not like officially, you could see a type deal where, Mariota was the guy for the Titans at the beginning of the season, and then Tannehill or Mariota had struggled for a while, and they gave Tannehill his opportunity, and he shined. I'm not saying that would happen just like that, but to me that tells that it could happen. And so I think Cam Newton could be a great backup option for the Titans, especially when you give into consideration that O-line and then the running threat of Derrick Henry. That could be very interesting. So that's the one possibility I could see as a backup, and then the other possibility, as I said, and then the other possibility I could see where he would be coming in to fight for the job out of the gate is the Jags with Gardner Minshew, because obviously the Jags just sent Nick Foles to the Bears, so really they don't have a good second string at this point. To me, the Jags would be an ideal fit because honestly I think Cam Newton could easily beat out Gardner Minshew for a job. And, I mean, the Jags have other problems. Obviously, it wouldn't be as good of a setup as the Titans from a football standpoint. But as far as him getting a job, the Jags might be the best option other than the Titans. So that's what I think about what could happen with Cam. As far as Jameis Winston is concerned, I mean, he's in the same boat as Cam. He's going to have to be a backup for the first time in his NFL career. I don't think Jameis would necessarily have as much of a problem with that as Cam would, because Cam has a bigger brand. Cam has had a, pretty illustrious NFL career up to this point, an MVP, a Super Bowl appearance, the Superman brand. I mean, he's a big, sparkly name in the NFL. Not to say that Jameis Winston isn't, but not to Cam's degree, I would say. But to me, it's pretty simple where Jameis Winston should go. At least I think it is. And to me, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here's why. One, Jameis needs grooming. I think Jameis Winston has a lot of potential left in this league. He was first. I got some stats. Jameis, he just needs grooming. I think he's got a lot of potential in this league, in the NFL. I think he's got a lot of potential left in him for his NFL career. He just needs to clean it up. I mean, he's already shown the ability to be able to pass and to be able to throw touchdowns. The problem is he's throwing the same amount of interceptions to match it, and he needs to clean it up. He needs grooming, and I think he knows that, and I think he would be open to backing up Ben Roethlisberger for a year, who has this year and then next year left on his contract with the Steelers, and Big Ben's getting to the point where he's getting close to retirement. Who better to groom Jameis Winston than literally the same quarterback that Jameis Winston has been compared to time and time again, both in build and just his style of play, than Ben Roethlisberger? I mean, when you think about it, Jameis Winston, that's all he really needs is grooming. He had 33 touchdowns this year. That was second in the league. He was first in passing yards with 3,109 yards. The problem was he was also first in interceptions with 30 interceptions, leading the league. So really all he needs is grooming, and who better to do that than Big Ben? And that's just on the Jameis Winston side of things. When you look at it from the Steelers side of things, it makes just as much sense, because they need a succession plan. They don't have a succession plan. We saw that last year. Mason Rudolph is not the answer. Duck, duck, goose is not the answer. They need a succession plan, especially with Big Ben retiring in the next 2 years, most likely, or at least not being on the Steelers any longer. I don't know why he would go anywhere else but then retire as a Steeler. Who better than Jameis Winston, following a year of sitting behind Ben, getting groomed, Ben showing him kind of what he knows. They're a similar build. They have a similar play style. I mean, Jameis has literally been compared to Big Ben in those two aspects. Who better to do it? It could almost be the perfect setup for Jameis Winston. Much like the Titans could be a great setup for from a football standpoint for Cam, I think the Steelers could be the same type deal, if not more so, beneficial for Jameis Winston. And like I said, only 2 years left on Big Ben's deal, this coming season and the one after. So, and the Steelers need a succession plan. So, where will Cam go? I say the Titans or the Jags. Where will Jameis Winston go? I'm saying the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, that's going to do it for today. Thank you for joining in, whether you watched on YouTube, Facebook, or listened through podcast as I drop my water bottle. I don't even know what day it is anymore now that we're doing this quarantine thing. I don't know anything anymore. I don't know what day it is, but Will Dalton, a.k.a. Wilbur and Gold, Wilbur and Gold Show. We'll see you next time.